Hey everybody, what's up? You're very welcome along to an Anfield Agenda special. I thought I'd bring my good friend Cash on, or Cashlin Boyle as you're correctly known, Cash. How are you, mate? It's been a while.
Yeah, I'm really, really good, thank you. It has been a while. Obviously, I saw you um, last week. Was it last weekend? The weekend before? I can't even remember now. For the last day of the season, which didn't end the way we wanted, but it was nice to catch up, and I'm doing well.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on. I feel like it's been a while since our listeners or our audience at this point. It used to be listeners, now we're, showing our faces and actually gone public. It's, I suppose, viewers. But look, we've so much to get through, Cash, in a very short period of time. I want to have a quick chat, mate, about firstly the two semi-finals. So I was speaking on streams recently about the difference of fans' feelings between the Monday night when Vincent Kompany stuck one in top bins for Manchester City against Leicester, and we're all heartbroken. And then what unfolded over the two Champions League nights on the Tuesday and the Wednesday. I'd love your perspective on that.
I think that's a really, really good point. And what a lot of people were saying was that it felt like the longest week in football. That Monday night where Vincent Kompany sticks that ball in the top bin. By the time it gets to Wednesday, it feels like about a year has passed in footballing terms. I think what happened on Wednesday was really crucial in terms of how the fans ended up feeling about the Monday. I think what happened at Leicester, or sorry, pardon me, was it at Leicester? Was it an away game?
The
Or
Man
was it a
City
home
game,
game?
yeah, it was no
Man,
Man City game. Oh, geez, was that? No, that was a home. That was at the Etihad.
home game. Sorry, so the game at the Etihad, what happened there left a lot of people feeling very rightly downtrodden. But the fact that we came back and pulled off a European comeback that Manchester City would only dream of being capable of, I think that made a lot of people feel a lot better, and as though all of our efforts this season hadn't been in vain. So yeah, I think the beauty of football, if you like, is the fact that it can it can go from sort of the lowest of the lows to the highest of the highs within a mere 48 hours or 24 hours in our case. And it's given us a real lease of life to extend the season. And it helps that it's a comeback, or was a comeback, that Man City wouldn't have been able to do in Europe.
How are you feeling on the Tuesday? I know you live and work in the city of Liverpool. How are you feeling going around the Tuesday afternoon, early Tuesday evening before that Barca game?
If I'm being honest, I wasn't feeling that optimistic. It's not to say that I didn't believe that the boys could win the game on the night. I definitely thought we were going to win the game, but I didn't know we were going to win so comprehensively as to turn around the aggregate tie. And I think that was what totally shocked me. And I have to say that I'm not a cynic. I'm not a cynical fan, but I am, I suppose, a pragmatist and a realist. And I thought we'd win the game on the night, but not win the tie. And I think that's how a lot of people felt. Really, that was the presiding feeling that I felt, like, amongst my colleagues in the city, where you do speak to people day in, day out about what they think is going to happen, and that was how I felt. But then obviously the game started at the pace that it did, and then once Divock Origi scores the first goal, then you very much feel like it's on then, and so it transpired. It was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. As you've said, anybody I spoke to said, look, first and foremost, it's about salvage and pride. It's about getting the victory over Barcelona on the day and seeing what happens from there. My thought was, and I think from reading with Jurgen Klopp, he said something similar. If you can go into half time, even at 1-0, it's all about that clean sheet. 1-0 puts the pressure on them, then two goals in the second half. I think Jurgen Klopp spoke about managing the game in sections, and this is why he's managing Liverpool and we're not.
Well, exactly. I mean, he probably, of anyone, has a very, like, outward extroverted persona, but I think ahead of that game was very, very calm, and rightly so, I suppose. Going into it from that position, we were 3-0 down. There was arguably little to lose. No one, very few people, pardon me, expected us to win the tie. May have well have expected us to win the game, but not the tie. So we went into the game in a position of calm. Jurgen Klopp also knows from experience, both personal during his time at the club and otherwise, what Liverpool can do on a European night. I think he always felt like, were the score to be 1-0 at halftime, as you said, that the potential was always there in the second half to put Barcelona on the ropes. And actually, we went in at halftime even better off than what he originally predicted. But it was amazing to see how capable and how amazingly the boys performed on the night, because it's one thing to hope for that comeback, but it's another thing to replicate it.
I'm very interested in this, and it's a question I think I've asked all my mates who are Liverpool fans. When the score goes to 3-0 and it's level on aggregate, Does your psychology change as a fan about what you want us to do, or do you want us to go for the jugular and get the fourth, or are you thinking, I don't, this could go, we've done the job now, we can go into extra time. If we push too hard here, we're leaving ourselves exposed?
I think it depends on two things. I think, firstly, the opposition. In this game, I was very much of the opinion go for the jugular, because Barcelona are totally fragile. They're totally vulnerable. The Liverpool performance rendered them completely vulnerable. And so we ended up in a situation where you had them at 3-0. There was no reason why you couldn't go for 4-0 and 5-0, because they were playing that badly and we were playing that well. I suppose the second factor that I would consider is the fact that it was a knockout tie. So we were in a position where, okay, we could have saw the game out. We could have saw out the 90, gone into extra time, but then there's every chance that they would have scored a goal, which would have then resulted in us needing 5. So that would have been very, very difficult. So to answer your question, I think you've got to consider the opposition and the nature of the tie.
And a little word on Trent's Corner before we move on to have a chat about that Spurs semi-final. I mean, I don't know how many times you've watched it, but I keep watching it over and over again.
I love it. I think I love it because it firstly, it worked. That's the first thing. Secondly, I don't think you can underestimate the impact of Jurgen Klopp on this team in respect of the freedom he gives the players. So can you imagine a pragmatic manager like Antonio Conte, Jose Mourinho, to name but a few? Could you imagine players that play for those managers feeling in the moment, we can do something this daring in such a crucial game and such a crucial juncture in that game? I would never think, or I don't think that many managers would instill the confidence in their players to try something like that. And that's what I loved about it. It was very much a representation of the relationship Jurgen Klopp has with the players and the trust he has in them. And the fact that it obviously came to pass and it came to work in our favour, was the icing on the cake. Had it not worked, then maybe people would have been critical. But you know what? It did work. It was our local player. It was the player we all hope is the next one club man, if you like. And the fact that it was that player at such a young age doing that on the biggest stage in world football, everything about it was good.
Yeah, it was great. And one of my favourite things about this actually had nothing to do with the players as well. The fact that the referee allowed the goal to stand for me was vitally important, because I just kept waiting for some reason the ref, because sometimes you can get a fussy ref who say I didn't blow my whistle. The fact that he let it go, I thought it would have been a crying shame if he hadn't.
I think so. I mean, I totally agree with you. I momentarily thought there's no way he's going to allow this to stand. He's going to blow it up. It's been taken too quickly. Or whatever. And I think part of the reasoning for that, well, firstly, I suppose we as fans have sort of expect the worst, but secondly, Barcelona just switched off in that moment, and it was so elementary from them, and it was so basic in terms of like a defending error, that for me in the moment I thought there's no way that they've done that and allowed the game to proceed, knowing that if Divock Origi makes a connection with the ball and he scores, then the goal will stand. So I momentarily thought, shit, he's going to blow it up for something. But actually, in the end, I think he recognised it for what it was, and sort of an ingenious piece of play within the confines of the game in terms of the rules. So it was perfect, really. And I think Barcelona were absolutely shell-shocked and were looking for a whistle that never came.
The following night, then, we've seen a similar crazy game unfolding in Amsterdam, and I just want to quickly say congratulations to Spurs, obviously, but there was one thing about the two legs that really did shock me. One, the fact that it took Mauricio Pochettino so long to understand that if he moves his players 10 yards further forward and tries to pen Ajax back in, they're going to take control of the game. And two, that Ajax absolutely shit themselves and couldn't deal with basic defending for Fernando Llorente and couldn't deal with the second balls.
I think those aspects that you've highlighted are really, really important. And I think, firstly, I agree with you. Congratulations to Spurs. I mean, personally, a lot of fans disagree on this, but I wanted Spurs in the final from the perspective that I think they're the known quantity and I think we can beat them. But in terms of the Pochettino, I suppose the realisation he had mid-game in terms of how to move his players further up, I think that was the masterstroke, and ultimately that, coupled with essentially just putting Llorente up front and launching balls to him, that was what was Ajax's undoing. And whether he knew that or whether he just lacked the personnel to make any other kind of tactical changes remains to be seen, because obviously we know that without Harry Kane, Spurs don't really have a recognised number, like a recognised out-and-out striker, if you like. Obviously Son plays through the middle, as does Lucas Moura, but you would argue that they really didn't have that much personnel-based choice to change. And they thought, well, battering around, let's go for that. But what it did do was expose Ajax for the defensive frailties and naivety that they do possess, being a young team. But what I would say is that tactic, whether it was by luck or whether it was by tactical nous, that won't work against Liverpool in the final, because obviously we're a much better defensive unit than Ajax. So it was interesting to watch. I really like Pochettino as a coach. I can't argue that. But obviously, really respect him. Think he's done a great job with Spurs. But I do believe that we're a completely different entity to Ajax or anyone else that they've faced in the competition to date.
Absolutely, all respect to Pochettino and Spurs to get to a Champions League final, having been limited in the transfer market as he had, and worked and coached, much like Klopp, coached and improved players that were at his team. Every respect. I mean, I have nothing but admiration for Spurs as a club. I think it's going to be a marvellous final, a marvellous occasion, but that does bring us on to the starting 11 for the final. And I know it's very difficult at this moment in time because we're not 100% on Bobby, we're not 100% on Naby, but what's your gut feeling? What would you go with starting 11?
I mean, I think you go with your standard back five that you would expect. Go for Alisson, Becker, goal. Trent, right back, Andy Robertson, left back, and then I think Matip has earned his chance in the final alongside Van Dijk. I know that may be hard for Joe Gomez, but I think on merit he deserves it. Your midfield, I would go for Fabinho, Jordan Henderson, and Gini Wijnaldum, I would say. And then I've got my numbers correct here. You've got your 4, 7, 8. Yeah, and then you've got your front three. If Bobby is fit, and I think he will be, I would play your front three as standard. But then if Bobby isn't fit, I think it's an interesting one, because obviously you've got Divock Origi, who has scored really, really important goals, and I don't think anyone can deny his influence and his importance to the run that we've had. But what I would say is the contrast in quality between that front three, Bobby, Sadio and Mo, and anyone else that comes in is quite pressing, it's quite obvious. So if Bobby isn't fit, I would play Divock Origi through the middle. But again, I would move Mo Salah through the middle, and I would play Divock Origi off him along with Sadio Mane. But I don't know if I would prefer that not to happen.
It's funny, I seen your pause when you were talking about the midfielders, and everybody I've spoken to has the same pause between Gini Wijnaldum and James Milner, because part of you thinks Gini Wijnaldum has had an expert season. His level has gone up, he's been so consistent. But James Milner hasn't won the Champions League. James Milner, you could see in the semi-final what it meant to James Milner to get to another Champions League final, and if he was put on that pitch he would die for the cause.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's a case to be made for a lack of desire of any of the players, and it's a difficult one, because I don't think that James Milner is necessarily any less capable than Gini Wijnaldum. I don't think he's a starkly inferior player or anything like that, but if you were to remove the sentimental element from it, which I totally would struggle to do because I love James Milner, but luckily Klopp is more ruthless than me. But I think if you were to remove that aspect, in terms of a player who I think would operate really, really well against Spurs, in terms of being really good at protecting the ball, in terms of being really, really good at keeping things ticking over within the midfield and being really dynamic, I would possibly start Gini over James Milner, but I wouldn't be unhappy with either selection if it was made.
Another interesting point for both clubs here, and I believe this is the first year this has happened, is there's going to be 12 substitute places on the bench for managers to pick from, which does give Jurgen Klopp a much better amount of options than we had last year against Real Madrid. We know Ryan Brewster's out there, we're unsure what's going on with Naby Keita as well. We'll probably see some younger players on the bench, but the fact that Jurgen Klopp will have 12 players to choose from, and if it does go to extra time, then obviously you've got your 4 substitution as well. I like it. Because we've got a stronger squad than Spurs, I believe. Yeah,
absolutely. I think you look at the benches at the moment. You made a reference to having younger players on the bench, and we both know that's only possible if the bench is expanded to 12, as it has been in this circumstance. But I think Spurs actually quite often do have very young players on their bench. I mean, they've got Kyle Walker-Peters that features regularly on their bench, Oliver Skip, players that you wouldn't say are household names, and you would argue aren't game changers at that level. So what I would say is Spurs have a smaller squad, whereas the more expanded bench really gives us an opportunity to have our seasoned sort of pros and our I would say experienced team as your sort of first names on the bench, but then you have other options depending on the circumstances of the game. So, for example, if you thought the game was going to go to penalties, potentially you would use your fourth substitution to bring on someone who you know is particularly adept at penalties, even if they're a younger player or whatever. So I do think the bigger bench suits us. It suits our superior squad. And, Jurgen Klopp is someone who will revel in having those options. But hopefully we won't need anyone from the bench to change the game. But if we do, it's good to know that you've got a lot of options there.
One thing I'm certain of, without any doubt, is that Jurgen Klopp is going to, one, tell the players to shoot early against Hugo Lloris, and two, every single corner is going to go right in on top of Hugo Lloris, because Hugo Lloris can be world class. He can make unbelievable saves, but he definitely has a fuck up in him as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this season he has had, in terms of mistakes, I think he's been one of the worst goalkeepers, I believe, for a number of mistakes that have led to goals this season. I mean, we saw that to our benefit in the game at Anfield, obviously, that we won earlier this season. He, as you rightly said, he can be world class, but he has a rick in him, whereas our keeper is world class and doesn't really seem to have a rick in him, bar the Leicester game earlier this season. And Alisson has been imperious in the Champions League. So I do think you're right. I think that's an area to be exploited. I think particularly from an aerial perspective, I wouldn't say it would be our normal style to just, I suppose, not lump balls into the box. But I think if you get set pieces, if you get corners, we do have good corner delivery from Trent particularly, that players, including the centre-backs, can get on top of and try and capitalise on.
I did want to have a chat about the owners, but time's after getting away from me a little bit. So before I let you go, I just want to get your thoughts on what you think Liverpool need in this upcoming transfer window. I say upcoming, it's open as we speak. And a couple of players who you expect to leave that might be, say, a surprise. So we know, for instance, the likes of Kleiny, he's gone. Mignolet's gone. Moreno's gone. Sturridge is gone. So a couple of players or a couple of positions you think would need strengthening, and then maybe one or two surprise elements that you think might move on.
I think certainly we could do with a backup striker or someone comparable with Bobby. I know that's very, very hard to find in terms of his particular skill set, particularly when you're looking at a player who's going to be content to be second fiddle, if you like, because you're not going to go in there and replace Firmino. But I would argue we do need someone like that. I don't even know at this point who you would really go for. Do you actually go for someone? Do you try and promote Brewster? It's a difficult one, but I think if I was to be picky, I would look at someone in that position. A lot of people have spoken about players such as Timo Werner, for example, but whether that would be someone that we would legitimately go for, I'm not sure. The other position I think we could do with some backup strength would be in the left back position, because obviously we know how imperious Andy Robertson is, but Moreno is going to leave, and I think in the event that Andy is injured or can't play, we don't really want a third season where James Milner has to play left back at any point. I know he can, but I don't think that's fair on either him or the functionality of the team as a cohesive unit. I think it's important to have a specialist backup player in that position. But I haven't actually considered who I would go for. To be honest, I've been so consumed with the Champions League final that I haven't even thought about transfers yet that much, because I think it's important to respect the team that got us to that point, and then after Madrid we can talk about it more. But I think left back and striker is what sticks out to me.
Yeah, there's been a little bit of talk about Adam Lewis maybe getting a chance to go in the backup. I've seen some names mentioned, and it's very difficult to even consider the likes of a Ben Chilwell or something when you know he's not going to play. And Ben Chilwell's at that point in his career where he wants to play. I'm just using him as an example. Lloyd Kelly was another one, of course. He went and signed for Bournemouth. I'm of the belief that I don't think we'll sign an out-and-out number 9 because of the belief Klopp has in Brewster and how hard he fought to keep Ryan Brewster and get him to sign that first pro contract. With regards to a couple of players going out, let me just throw two names at you really quickly here. Harry Wilson and Marko Grujic. What do you think is going to happen there?
It's funny that you say that. I was actually those are the two names I was going to say to you, because my brother and I were talking about this yesterday. I think Grujic, I have no real qualms with him leaving. I think at Hertha Berlin he was really revered and really, really respected as one of the best midfield players they've had in years, according to their chairman. That was what I believe he said about him. So I think if he was to find his level in Germany, that kind of equivalent level, and to be really central in a team of that ilk, then I would wish him well, and I would say, well, the position that you would play at Liverpool potentially is currently occupied by Fabinho, the best defensive midfielder in Europe. So I really don't see Grujic breaking in. I think there's a definite argument to be made that if he was going to have done it, he would have been kept, and he would have potentially done it by now, albeit maybe not consistently, but he would at least have stayed at the club. And, you know, he's got quite a few loan campaigns out now. So I would say with him, it's a shame. He was Klopp's first signing. It would be a shame to say that it didn't work out. But I wouldn't necessarily consign it as a complete failure. But I think the calibre of player we now attract is different to when Klopp first arrived. And Grujic is just an unfortunate victim of that. As for Wilson, I think Wilson's a really, really difficult one, because I know a lot of fans want to see him given the opportunity, and he has been scintillating for Derby this season. He's been crucial in, you know, their playoff sort of success, both in the semi-final against Leeds and then obviously the run to that in the Championship. It's no mean feat. That's a good level. Obviously his left foot is completely and rightly lauded. But the argument for me would be, would he be as focal and central to the Liverpool system as he is to Derby's? Because arguably it's the system that's sort of not built around him, but it's really built in order to enable him to thrive. Would he get lost in the Liverpool vacuum if he were to come back and be given the opportunity? I think he would come back knowing that his opportunities were going to be limited in the sense of pre-season. Would he try to do too much? Would he impress with the limited amount of time he has? It's hard to know what is the right way to manage Harry Wilson, because I think he's a player with undeniable talent. But who would he dislodge in the first 11? And that would be my question. So, yeah, that was a bit convoluted, but to sum up, I think Grujic I'd happily allow to move on, and Harry Wilson I might keep with 7 on loan to the Premier League next season. Hopefully with Derby, if Derby would go up, that would feel like a good, consistent step in his career.
I think if we do see Harry Wilson moved on, we're going to have a clause inserted, the Xherdan Shaqiri type clause, where Liverpool have at least first refusal on him in the future. Grujic, like you, I'm interested to see what happens there. I just look at him and I think he could be some amazing DM if he fills out, if he continues to progress. And I don't want him to be a player that we look at in 2 or 3 years' time and think, oh, why? I don't want him to be our Paul Pogba, for instance, that Manchester United let go.
I think equally he could end up being our Emre Can, in the sense of like no one misses Emre Can. So it could be that kind of thing where it's you sometimes you sell players thinking, oh God, I hope this doesn't bite me in the ass, but actually I have a funny feeling with Grujic we would acknowledge that he's had a good career and we would wish him well, but I don't think we would end up regretting that decision. I think if we sold Harry Wilson, we could end up regretting that decision without like the appropriate buyback clause, like you say.
For me, really quickly on Harry Wilson, I think the future of Harry Wilson might be intrinsically linked with the future of Xherdan Shaqiri. I think 2 players very similar in what they can bring to the team, 2 players that have a wand of a left foot, and 2 players that I've seen too many times disappear within games, but have magical moments and highlight reel moments and free kicks and corners and set pieces. But I watched Harry Wilson as well, and whilst you don't want to be too critical of a young player because their development does go in peaks and troughs, and no doubt Jurgen Klopp's coaching would move him on, I just think if Shaqiri stays, I don't see Wilson staying.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, and I think the comparison is really a really good one. I mean, the difference I would say for Wilson and Shaqiri is they have similar profiles, but Shaqiri's 5-6 years older, so you'd argue that experience ties in his favour, but then also the fact that he is 6 years older, you would argue that unpredictability should have been ironed out by now. And I there is an argument to say that Jurgen Klopp was very happy with Shaqiri for a large part of the season, but that very much dipped in the latter stages, which is why he hasn't really been involved. So you're right, I think the future of Xherdan Shaqiri isn't uncertain really as such, but it's not as certain, I would have said, as I would have said a few months, sort of at the turn of the year. So it is an interesting one, but I do think you're right. I think the players are of similar profile, and Harry Wilson, weirdly enough, probably would go for more money than we bought Xherdan Shaqiri for, which is bizarre really when you think about it. But if there's a financial deal to be done there, Michael Edwards and co will do it.
Absolutely. Look, Cash, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, if you've enjoyed this stream, please do hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up. But most importantly, we'd love to know your thoughts, so please do comment in the comment section below and let me know if you disagreed with anything I've said or anything Cash has said, or you think there's something we missed out on. Cash, I'm so sorry time was against us, buddy, but we will catch up very soon. Thank you for giving up your time. I know you're a very busy lady. I know this because I don't know where you get the hours in the day. I've said this to so many people. I don't know how you do it. Thank you so much as always, Cash.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.